growing up around Chicago.
And when did you first get interested in Chicago theater?
I could take you back to when I first got interested in theater, and that's when I was a very, very young guy. I always loved it. And then in the 70s is when I was getting a little older, and, I was in college, but I became aware of, gosh, there's a lot going on in Chicago all of a sudden. Prior to that, there hadn't been much. But all of a sudden, there's all this stuff going on, and I got very interested in it and wanted to be a part of it, actually.
Really? Now, why? So my question is, was there suddenly a lot going on, or was there suddenly an awareness that a lot was going on? In other words, did your, like for me, I didn't even know what was going on around me, and then I got to a certain age, and, I didn't know we could do that.
Yeah, it's kind of like that. But an awareness and the fact that a lot is going on, they both feed each other. So, it starts to spiral.
Yeah.
But in the 70s, you started having companies like the Steppenwolf Company, which has produced so much incredible material and excellent performers. Something called the Remains Theater, out of which Bill Peterson from CSI came and Amy Morton came from Chicago PD. There's a lot going on in the 70s.
And it's not just about acting or comedians. I mean, you've got about playwrights and composers and designers, and it's just it's such a fascinating book. So amazing.
Thank you.
And
the whole idea. I'm sorry, Bobby. Go ahead.
Oh, well, when you were compiling all of this during your research, were you surprised at some of the talent that came out of there?
I was. I felt like I had a pretty good idea of who came out of Chicago because I was from here. But the more I dug, the more I was like, really? All of this came from here. It's astonishing to me, and I'm hoping the book will help share that with the rest of the country.
And it's really wonderful to go behind the scenes, and you've got so many different voices. I mean, gosh, one of the ones that stand out for me is, of course, David Schwimmer, because I really was a huge Friends fan, as were my children, and he has really exposed himself to all different facets of the industry.
Absolutely. And he was, he and and a group of his friends at Northwestern University started something called Looking Glass Theater. And that's where all that took off from. That was in the 80s.
I had no idea about all that. So tell me, as far as the book goes, the book obviously is going to be embraced by people who are interested in live theater, correct?
I hope so, yeah.
Yeah, so it's mostly live theater, but as Robin pointed out, live theater is usually the birthing ground for the other forms of entertainment, TV and movies.
A lot of talent does come out of live theater. It's a place where people can really hone their craft because they're doing it night after night after night.
Do you teach this subject in school?
I don't. No. I was once upon a time I was a high school English teacher.
So this would be a class I would take, though. I would love to know, like this book. It looks like it's a whole curriculum.
That it's interesting you said that because that's what I'm hoping. I really would like to see this history shared with some of the new talent that's coming up, whether they're writers, directors, behind the scenes actors, to get a sense of how these companies that are now part of our landscape came to be. This is how you do it. This is how it happens.
Right.
It starts small.
Do you know when I was a fan of Second City Television, I used to actually feel bad for the nickname Second City because I was from New York. I thought why don't they call it Windy City instead of Second City? It makes it seem like it's it's less than or something.
You know what? That's really interesting. The fact that they named it Second City was a very Chicago thing because someone in New York his name is A.J. Liebling, wrote an article for the New Yorker that referred to Chicago as the Second City and was very disparaging of the city and just thought it was a bunch of rubes. And when the three guys who started Second City started it, they said, you know what? Let's call it that.
Oh, that is funny.
That name. Yeah. So that's that's how that came to
So
be.
you got kind of rubbing it in their face, right?
Yeah, it's like, you want to call us that? Fine.
You talk about the not-for-profit models and the for-profit models.
Yes. One of the interesting things about let's say this is a difference between New York and Chicago that I've heard about. People talk about New York theater as being kind of as a for-profit model, mainly, but in Chicago it really is largely a non-profit model, which allows you to take a lot more risk. You could take the risk, and I think that's what leads to innovation and originality.
So, in the people that you spoke to in order to do the research for the book, in addition to the people on stage, were the behind the scenes people, especially the writers, were they part of the whole thing?
Oh, very much so. The main theme of the book is that Chicago theater is like an ecology. All the parts make all the other parts possible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
And it operates very much as a large ensemble. Whether it's within, one theater group or the whole city, everybody's a part of it. So you just see who's on the stage. That's all.
Yeah. Do some of the people who we see, the ones who are very visible, also do behind the scenes, or can you tell us about some of the actors, for example, who are also prolific writers?
Tracy Letts comes immediately to mind.
Mm-hmm.
Tracy Letts wrote a play called August Osage County that went to New York and won something like 6 Tonys and a Pulitzer Prize and traveled all over. He's a very prolific writer, but you can see him in a lot of films. He's in Elvis and Nixon. He was a regular in the series Homeland. I'm trying to think of the name of that Laurie Metcalf movie. Darn it, it's not coming to me. But he does a lot of film and television work as well. Yeah,
because she was in Roseanne, right? The first incarnation
Laurie
of it.
was, yeah.
Laurie, yeah. And it was pretty interesting.
Actually,
it was pretty interesting how your list of contacts grew, how you put out feelers for the book.
One of my great surprises actually was how many people were willing to talk to me. It never occurred to me that I'd end up interviewing well over 300 people. I think if I knew that in advance, I'd be pretty daunted by it. But one thing leads to another, where I'll talk to one person, and inevitably they say, you know what, have you talked to this person, and this person? I'll put you in contact. And that's kind of how it all works.
Are the actors who find the stage in Chicago, are they still not content until they play New York? Is that same stigma even affecting them?
I can't generalize on that, but I'll tell you the feeling I get from them and what they talk to me about. They love performing in Chicago. And even if they've moved elsewhere, they do come back to Chicago to continue to perform.
The reason I'm asking is because you're talking to Ocala, Florida. It's a small town. They have an amazing live theater here, the Ocala Civic Theater, and quite frequently we will have the guests from the theater in here, the actors and actresses. And one of the questions that comes up is what's your what do I always say, your bucket list. What's your bucket list stage? Yeah, what's your bucket list stage? Where would you like to play? And almost always they say Broadway.
Yeah, that's traditionally the case.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't want to put words in anybody's mouth here that no, I don't want to go to Broadway. Of course they do.
Yeah.
But a lot of them continue to live here though too. Tracy Letts and Terry Coons live here. So. Yeah, here's the other thing. Here's another distinct difference. Is yes, they'd like to get to Broadway, of course. Who doesn't want the visibility? Who doesn't want the money for that? But at the same time, it's not always the end goal. The end goal is to do very, very good work.
That's right. Yeah.
And sometimes the result will be Broadway or a television show. But there's a real emphasis on getting good at what they do.
Yeah, and it's a gift to the people of Chicago as well. It's just as it is to the people here. When you have a good theater in town, or a number of good theaters, it's a good thing for everybody. Can you tell me about some of the which was your favorite? That's a kind of a bad question. That's a dopey question. But tell me about one of the interviews you did that really stands out for you.
There's a lot of them that stand out. Here's one I just used at an event. There's a small theater called Congo Square in Chicago, and it's African American based. And they were doing a show in conjunction with the Goodman Theater, which is just an old venerable institution. And they were starting to run out of money partway through it. And Derek Sanders, who had started it and was the artistic director, suddenly out of nowhere got a call from Amy Morton, who was part of the Steppenwolf Theater. And she said, "Can I talk to you?" He goes to meet with her. She said, "You know what? We used to have this little company called Remains Theater, and we always held on to our money thinking maybe someday we'll come back to this and reignite it, but that's not going to happen. So we're looking at smaller theaters that are doing what we used to like to do, and we're giving out the money that we that we hung on to. Here's a check for $10,000. Use it however you want." And it saved his show. And he said, and she had no idea that they were having those financial difficulties. And he said, "That's what I love about Chicago."
Oh, wow. That's a cool story. The book is called Ensemble, An Oral History of Chicago Theater. One of the cool things about this part of the country here in Florida is that we have a lot of people who retired here from Chicago. And they're it's just an amazing kind of phenomenon. We have pretty much Chicago, we have Michigan, and we have New York. Those are like the three main places that you hear people are from, right?
Right, exactly. This must have been a serendipity for you, since you began your career all those years ago loving theater and also writing plays and musicals.
Yeah, I started that way, and I tried to break into it in Chicago, and I wasn't very successful at it. The place called Victory Gardens did a one-act play that I did, and Second City Children's Theater actually did a little musical that I wrote with a friend of mine from college. And actually, the person who starred in that was a complete unknown named George Wendt, who went on to much bigger things in my little musical.
Wait, where do we know him from? George Wendt, is that?
Norm from Cheers.
Oh, okay, right.
Yeah.
Right.
And when people are going to Chicago as a viewer, I know I've been down there, and my folks always went there. They had the different types of theaters also. The theater in the around, and then your regular theater with stages, large venues, small venues, and it really is an amazing place. There's room for everybody with talent there.
That's a key element. You're exactly right. People say if you come here, you're going to be able to find work somewhere and get a chance to do good work. There's something like 250 theaters here. It's a vague number because it depends on how you count them. But there's a lot of theaters here, and like you say, of all kinds.
And is that something special this year, the Year of Chicago Theater?
Yes, it's the Year of Chicago Theater. The city has named it that. And so there's an emphasis on what's going on in the theater here and really getting the word out about it. And we actually released this book right smack in the middle of that, trying to connect to it.
It's an amazing accomplishment that you've done, Mark. It's just amazing. As I look at the information, it boggles my mind that you were able to get so many interviews. Was it hard in the beginning? Did you have a line that you would say to them to say, I'm doing a book and I'd like to interview you, or did you have to know somebody to know somebody?
It started with going to people that I already knew and felt comfortable with. And then I would say, who else do you think I should talk to? And people were so giving about wanting to say, you know what, I'll put you in contact, don't worry about it. And then it would go from there. And as I accumulated names then too that people might recognize. I was able to say, well, I've talked to David Schwimmer, I've talked to Alan Arkin, I'd love to talk to you, and that helps too, obviously.
And your book is laid out in such a way that when you're talking about the different venues that you put in the book, you actually have conversations between the people that are part of those venues.
Yes, it's set up. It's not straight oral history the way, say, Studs Terkel would have done, where there are soliloquies by individuals. It's really set up very much like a play, where, say, Gary Sinise, who's one of the founders of Steppenwolf, will say, and then I met Terry Kinney, and then Terry Kinney will say, I met Gary at such and such. And so it continues like that, and I'm hoping that it's very conversational. That's what I was aiming for. One person said it was like we're all sitting around the table together.
Exactly.
Yeah,
that's a great description.
Yeah, I can see it like that as well. The choreographers that you spoke to, can you tell me a little bit about them?
I spoke to a woman named Ronna Kay, who in the 60s was, the late 60s and early 70s, was the original choreographer for Grease, which was really interesting to hear. I spoke to a whole lot of people who were part of the beginning of Grease, the very first cast. Jim Jacobs, who wrote it, and Ronna Kay, who was the choreographer for it,
right?
And Guy Burrell, who was the director. Yeah.
So Grease basically comes out of Chicago?
Grease, completely comes out of Chicago.
Excuse me for not knowing that. I didn't.
I didn't mean.
I didn't either.
Yeah, well, now I'm glad, though. I mean, that's partly what the book is for.
Yeah,
now,
right.
You know, they came out of Chicago. He was in a tiny little place called Kingston Mines, and they did for about $1.50.
Oh my gosh!
Oh wow!
Oh my gosh!
That's amazing.
It started really small, and then very quickly it went to New York off Broadway, and then very quickly after that it went to Broadway, and then the rest is history.
And were there any interviews and scenarios that you weren't able to put into the book because of length or something?
There's, one of the heartbreaks of something like this is, even though it is a large book, as you pointed out, there's so much I couldn't include just because it just is too long, and so that bothered me. But the other thing is, there are people that I wish I could have gotten to. There was a major figure in Chicago named Sheldon Patinkin who started in 1953 at the start of the movement and went all the way through to about 2014, was part of this whole Chicago movement and influenced a lot of people, and he died 4 months before I was able to, before I started the book. That's a heartbreak for me, too. So there are people that I wasn't able to get to because they had passed away. So that made it hard.
Was he your hero?
Sheldon, in retrospect, I didn't know that much about him, to be honest, before I did this research. But if you look in the index, there are many, many references to Sheldon. Somebody from Steppenwolf told me the other day that if you were not directly touched by Sheldon Patinkin, you're certainly working with somebody who was. He was that influential in Chicago.
I don't think it's limited to Chicago or the Midwest. I think anybody interested in acting is going to eat this up, or just interested in theater, even if it's not the acting part of it. I think you've hit the core of what people fall in love with when they fall in love with theater, whether it's acting or something else. And I can imagine that, like I mentioned, our local theater, the actors around here, I'm sure once they hear about this, they will be reading it nonstop until they're done with the whole thing. It's like 600 something pages, right? Yeah. Almost 700 pages. I found the book on Amazon, and I know it's just a couple days old. Do you have a website set up for the book or for your work in general?
I do. There's a website that has some of those stories that are not in the book and also that supplement the book. It's Ensemblechicago, one word, .org. .com, I'm sorry. Ensemblechicago.com.
Okay, Ensemblechicago.com.
Was there anything that you found was a commonality from the different personalities that you interviewed?
Two big things jump out at me when you ask me that. One is that there is this extreme dedication to the work itself. I asked Laurie Metcalf about the early days of Steppenwolf, and I said, so your focus was really on the group then? She goes, no, it was the work. We wanted the work to be good. And I hear that over and over and over again. If you look at the epigraph at the beginning, Amy Morton says, we knew we weren't going to get rich, and we knew we weren't going to get famous, so we just got good. That's very common. The other thing is this real dedication to one another, to helping each other grow. That's just part of the ethos here in Chicago, in the Chicago theater community. It's really exceptional. That example I gave you with Congo Square and Amy Morton giving them money is just one of dozens.
That's a great story. Yeah, it's funny too that because I haven't read the whole book, but I would flip through it, and that was one of the stories I actually read. So it's kind of funny that you actually.
Is that right?
Yeah, it's funny that you actually mentioned that one.
Do some of the actors retain the spirit that they had in the very beginning of their career now that they've won like a ton of Emmys and Oscars and things?
Very much so. In fact, they talk about that. In the book, they talked about it. I asked them, how much of what happened here in Chicago do you retain? And inevitably, they say, oh, it's so much a part of the way that I work. Julia Louis-Dreyfus is an example of that. There were a lot of Chicago people in Veep. If you look in the foreword that she wrote with her husband Brad, there's a lot of people named from Veep that came from Chicago, and there is that kind of ethos there, and kind of an ensemble feel of that remarkable show.
Do you have some people in the book who started the theater but weren't necessarily involved in the making of what ends up as the product of the theater?
You mean didn't stay at the theater?
No, like let's say I open up a movie theater, but I never run the projector, I never make the popcorn. I just own it because I love theater. Let's say.
People really stay involved. I'd be sort of hard pressed to find somebody who did that. Who just opened it and then moved on.
Yeah.
Because it's more of a project than it is, I'm going to build a theater, now people can use it.
The title is perfect. Ensemble is the perfect title for this. I'm sure that when you finally came up with the title, you had that eureka moment, didn't you?
Yeah. It just seemed exactly right. And then I remember having that idea very early on and just stuck with it as kind of a North Star.
Your book is very fascinating because it just reeks of genuineness in there from all of the personalities that you have written about.
They are. It was very moving to talk to them because they are so genuinely attached to this place.
What's the last play you went to?
True West at Steppenwolf.
Oh my gosh,
Robert, you have to show me around Chicago one of these days.
Okay, we're gonna go.
You've got to come here. You'll be amazed.
All right, I have a copy of this amazing book. It's written by Mark Larson. It'll be yours if you call me right now, 622-9622. It's almost 800 pages. It's called Ensemble. If you're into theater, whether you know Chicago theater or not, you're going to still love this one. A lot of familiar names in the book for sure. Just call me and I'll put your name on it. The rest of us have to go buy it. I found it on Amazon. And, of course, the website was, again, could you repeat it, please?
EnsembleChicago.com.
EnsembleChicago.com. Mark Larson, thank you so much for being on the show with us today.
It was a great pleasure. I really enjoyed it.
That was fun. I love theater. Gotta get to it more often, Robin.
Yeah.
All right, we'll be right back.
Broadcasting from the Paddock Mall Studios, this is WOCA, Ocala, Gainesville, The Villages, 1370 AM, 96.3 FM, The Source.
Fox News, I'm Chris Foster. President Trump tweets about the suspect in a standoff in Philadelphia. He never should have been allowed to be on the streets. 6 officers were shot and injured.
2 officers were trapped inside for about 5 hours after the shooting broke out, but were freed by a SWAT team. Mayor Jim Kenney, a Democrat, is calling for stricter gun laws.
Whether it's our 6 officers who were shot or it's some 15, 17, 20-year-old kid on the streets of Philadelphia who gets shot with guns that shouldn't be in people's hands.
The accused shooter surrendered after tear gas was used.
Fox is tying to Jay Powers. There's a new Fox poll on gun control and President Trump.
The poll, conducted after mass shootings in Dayton and El Paso, found an overwhelming majority, 90%, want to see more background checks. 2/3 want assault weapons banned. President Trump's job rating has declined in the aftermath of the shootings, with 59% saying he's tearing the country apart.
Fox's Rachel Sutherland. This is Fox News.
Pros like you expect more out of the brands you use every day. Lowe's gets it. It's why we stock the best brands so you can get the job done right every time. And now we're offering Pro customers a chance to give one of those brands a try for free. Right now, pros can get up to 10 gallons of Valspar paint absolutely free and experience firsthand how Valspar delivers a smooth application and reliable color for all your touch-up work. Take your next paint job to the next level. Do it right for less. Start with Lowe's. Valid in Orlando and Phoenix stores only. Requires return authorization number. See Pro Desk for details.
Welcome to Office Depot. How can I help you?
We're getting her organized for back to school.
Yep, got my green notebook and folder for chemistry.
I mean, science is always green because, of course.
Right, because math always has red notebooks.
Right, because blue notebooks are for English! And yellow are for social studies! And purple is for music! And,
are we twins?
No. Get everything on their list from the advisors at Office Depot Office Max. This week's doorbuster, 1-inch binders for $1. $1 in-store or online at OfficeDepot.com. Limit 10.
Don't let this warm, wet weather fool you. It's the absolute best time of the year to plant trees because young trees love the warm, wet summer weather. That means it's time to visit the area's tree headquarters, Bob Wine's Camellia Gardens on Southeast 38th Street in Ocala. Right now, you can buy many large trees for as little as $49.99 and get a second tree just like it for half price. Tons of other specials too at Bob Wine's, like a jumbo 4-pack of veggie plants, just $3.99. Huge selection of crotons, all sizes and great fall color, starting at a low $6.99. Many fruit trees are buy one, get one free. Great fall color, so see them now. And in the old-timey greenhouse, all glazed pottery is buy one, get one half price. Don't wait, check the ad, then head to Bob Wine's Camellia Gardens in Southeast 38th Street, Ocala, daily till 4, Saturdays till 3, in the same blooming place since 1952.
Ocala Magazine is the city magazine distributed throughout Ocala, Marion County, and the Villages, providing award-winning coverage of important issues for almost 40 years. Hi, I'm Philip Glassman, publisher of Ocala Magazine. Ocala Magazine offers a platform for branding opportunities for your business or events while covering the latest in local lifestyle throughout print, digital, and social media. Listen every Friday at 10 a.m. on WOCA.
Hi, Matt Wilkerson here, your Verizon representative with news that will hum your car, make it smart and safe. How? With the new Hum device by Verizon. You can rest assured you're never alone. Flat tire? Lost? Accident? For $10 a month, Hum by Verizon has you covered. And I will come to you in Marion County to install the Hum for free. Time to call me at 352-528-0020. Are you ready to hum along? Call 352-528-0020.
Howdy folks, RL here for Dairy Queen Silver Springs. We want to thank Marion County for 45 years of loyalty. We love this wonderful community, so come on down to Dairy Queen Silver Springs and get some of our great food and ice cream. We have a number of great meal deals that include dessert at a better price than anyone in the industry. Our products are made fresh to order just for you. Dairy Queen Silver Springs, where we always treat you like kings and queens.
Here are today's headlines from the source, WOCA. The chair of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High Public Safety Commission dropped the bombshell at the start of its two-day meeting and on the first day of classes in Broward County.
Every single school has a safe school officer.
That may be true today, but Sheriff Bob Gualtieri counters Broward School Superintendent Robert Runcie with,
we only have a commitment from Sheriff Tony, because these charters are not acting, that he's only going to cover them until Friday. and if they don't act by Friday and sign a contract with him, that he's pulling out.
29 charter schools are affected. The MSD Commission chair acknowledges statewide there have been significant school safety improvements, especially with red flag orders, but more needs to be done, including getting all schools to conduct monthly active shooter drills. Eric Rodriguez, Miami.
After what he called a colossal failure of the bus system, the Leon County school superintendent is taking drastic action. Rocky Hanna has replaced the district's transportation director, and starting Monday, the district will go back to last year's bus routes. A suspect in a Pennsylvania double murder spotted in St. Augustine on Tuesday is under arrest. U.S. Marshals captured Jack Turner yesterday in West Virginia. He is accused of killing his stepmother and her son last week. Senator Marco Rubio is listening to people in the Panhandle who are still struggling after Hurricane Michael. In Panama City, Alan Bentz told Rubio he could hire 100 people tomorrow.
The pay is good. The problem is it's very difficult because of the housing issue for employees to move and live in Bay County and other counties that have been affected by the hurricane.
Speakers told Rubio that the reimbursements are taking too long. A Miami Dolphins player and the team's owner are agreeing to disagree. Wide receiver Kenny Stills criticized owner Stephen Ross last week for holding a fundraiser for President Trump. Stills says he and Ross had a short phone conversation, and while they don't see eye to eye, there are no hard feelings. There is no citizenship question on the 2020 census, but children's advocates are still concerned about an undercount of Hispanic children in Florida next year.
The controversy and the issues that the inclusion of the citizenship question raised have created real fear in the Hispanic and immigrant communities.
Lena Guzman with Child Trends says Florida could lose as much as $500 million a year for children's health insurance and other federal programs. There's a delay in the trial for a Chinese woman accused of trespassing at President Donald Trump's Palm Beach estate. Joel Malkin has that story.
Yujing Zhang was scheduled to go on trial next week, but a federal judge has postponed the start date until September 3rd to allow her more time to prepare a defense. The 33-year-old fired her public defenders in June and told the judge yesterday she'd been too sick to prepare for trial. The judge accused Zhang of trying to play games at a court hearing. Zhang allegedly lied to gain access to Mar-a-Lago back in March and was carrying a thumb drive with malware, 4 cell phones, and 2 Chinese passports. I'm Joel Malkin.
Reports show the Tampa Bay area has had an increase in new foreclosure filings in the first half of the year. Real estate information service ATTOM Data Solutions show filings went up by 18% compared to the same time last year. It's the opposite of the national trend, which saw foreclosures drop by 18%. Foreclosure activity still is considered relatively low compared to when the housing market crashed in the past. This week, children in Florida went back to school, and Attorney General Ashley Moody is taking action to stop teen vaping. She's asking parents to talk to their children about e-cigarettes and the dangers they pose. Moody joined 42 other state attorneys general to urge leading streaming companies to limit tobacco imagery content on their platforms. 13 states in the United States and the District of Columbia allow undocumented immigrants to obtain driver's permits, and Florida may soon become the 14th state. Florida Republican Senator David Simmons is proposing a bill to give undocumented immigrants a work and driver's permit. Undocumented immigrants will still need to take a driver's test and get driver's insurance before they hit the roads. Simmons says he's spearheading the proposal because he believes the U.S. Congress is failing to deal with the border crisis, forcing Florida to take action. Many undocumented immigrants say the law makes them afraid to drive to work or drop their children off at school because it's a misdemeanor offense to drive without a license in Florida. Democratic Florida Representative Anna V. Escamani said the bill will ensure that we have safer roads and that it's critical that anyone in the state of Florida takes a driver's test and has a license. A bicycle shop owner in Claremont says that he was the victim of card skimming. The culprit got away with one of his most expensive racing bikes worth about $3,000. Police say the scam involved skimming and that the credit card used to purchase the bicycle had fraudulent information on it. When we initially went to process the credit card, it came up with an error message.